Well, good morning, everybody. It's not a large crowd that gets here early in the morning, but certainly glad to have everybody here. Of course, I'm here, Gary Davis. I'm the VP of Cloud and Engineering here at TCG, and of course, I've got Dan Parigi here.
Thank you guys for coming.
Don't normally get an applause this early in the morning already, but certainly appreciate you being here. And having said that, Dan, I'm going to let you take it away just a little bit and talk about why TCG.
That, Gary. Okay, so for those of you who do not know who TCG is, we've been in business for 31 years, so we've got a pretty good track record of paying partners commissions perfectly on time, and for the last 31 years. We have channel managers across the country. We've got 20 channel managers who operate coast to coast, who work and manage with our 5,500 plus partners in the US. One of the biggest differentiators between us and a lot of our competitors is our agreement. Anyone who's got an agreement knows that our agreement is super simple. If you're working with a master agent and their agreement reads like the terms and conditions of Apple, you should probably run the other direction, right? So we have no quotas, we don't have any commitments, there are no minimum usage requirements with TCG, so you can sell one deal, you can sell 1,000 deals, it doesn't make a difference with us. We also pass through all of the bonuses and spiffs from every supplier. So, a lot of the master agents that we compete with, if you're an 80% partner or 75% partner, you get that much of the bonus. With TCG, you get every dollar of the bonus. So that's a nice differentiator. And then our portfolio is deep. We have over 220 partners right now for cloud, UCaaS, data, internet. I mean, whatever you want, we've got them. And here's a little visual representation of some of those. We're going to go through each one of these in depth, so just kidding.
Hang on tight, then.
Another little quick overview, 20 full-time channel managers, 5,500 agents. Our dedicated back office, we feel it's second to none. These guys do a great job. They really work hard. They're fast with quoting. They're quick with paperwork, order implementation. Nobody gets paid $1 until your customer starts to bill, right? So, nobody's sitting on orders. At the moment that order comes in, it's immediately rifled into the carrier system, sent to our commissions team to track and monitor, and the order is hopefully going to get to installation very quickly. So with TCG as well, for those of you who don't know about kind of the history of TCG, it's really two family businesses. It's Lou Rubin, who's my full partner in the business, and myself. And Lou's, basically his family is pretty heavily involved, so it's his son, his son-in-law, his daughter on his side, and then on our side it's myself, my sister, my brother-in-law, my brother, my other brother-in-law. So we go deep, and then we have our extended family with Gary and Connie and some of the other additions, Rob Hill, who I've known for 20 years. So our company is built on family values, and we still pay the families of partners who have passed away through the years. So unlike many of our competitors who are looking for a reason to terminate commissions, that does not happen with TCG. We continue to pay for as long as we're being paid by the carrier. Dedicated commissions team with rolling audits. We've recovered over $1 million in comp. Our 8-person commissions team, they're entirely tasked with making sure that every deal that gets sold gets the commission and pays properly. So, a lot of companies are kind of just shoveling things into the furnace, and then if it comes out the other side, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Well, we're trying to monitor and track every single nickel of revenue that's been sold. Mentioned that we do pay the families of agents who have passed through the years. Dedicated channel support for all partners. We don't charge. I've actually heard in this industry that if you call in multiple times on an account, your commission can go from a nice rate, which you signed for, down to a much lower rate based on how much you've called, almost like a lawyer type model. We do not do that here. We provide unlimited free support for anything that you need for your customers. And then, of course, no commission reduction again for working with our back office. So why work with a master agent? We hear this all the time, right? Why would you work with a master agent? Hey, I'm going to go out and sign 200 carrier agreements directly with the providers directly. You know what? I don't need you guys. I'm just going to try to go it alone. Well, here's why you work with a master agent, right? When you have thousands of partners selling across the country as a group, somebody somewhere sometime is always putting traffic with one of the carriers that we work with. So every carrier agreement typically has a quota or a commitment that needs to be achieved. Some of the larger companies won't even allow you to have an agreement with them just because they only want to have a handful of master agents that they work with, and they want to have the volume coming through a select amount of people or a select amount of companies. So some of the things that we hear all the time are, hey, I just got a termination notice from XYZ company, and my commissions are going to stop. And I just talked to an MSP 2 days ago who's like, hey, I put up a huge account with XYZ company. You know, it was a $20,000 account. I was getting $3,000 a month, and they stopped paying me. Well, that's the reason you want to work with a master agency, right? Master agencies will protect your best interest, make sure that you're continuing to be paid your commission. We're working almost as a group of people working together, and that's some of the benefits of doing that.
Yeah, so it's commitments. You typically have to sign up for a lot of commitments. Obviously, then it loads up the possibility that in cancellation, of course, ultimately then some lost revenue there if they're not careful.
You got it, man. And we hear it all the time, right? So companies will sign an agreement. And here's one thing I didn't really go into is the amount of time that we spend on carrier agreements, right? We won't sign a carrier agreement unless it has the evergreen commission terms, successors and assigns. We all have seen it. Companies consolidate, companies get bought, companies get sold. Well, whoever buys that company has to continue paying us as part of the deal in every agreement that we sign. Otherwise, we won't sign an agreement with them. Also, they have to recognize that we partner with 5,000 plus sub-agents, so should we get a bad apple in that group, that we have the right to cure the problem by moving on from that sub-agent. So there's a lot of different reasons to work with a master.
Good. Yeah, again, you kind of hit on this, but protection, making sure you're protecting that base, making sure you continue to get paid nonstop. A lot of the harsh terms and a lot of the individual supplier type direct agreements, things like that. And of course, a lot of those are very, very one-sided. So definitely some there. And of course, the contracts you talked a lot about. And the evergreen status, maybe spend just a minute talking about what is evergreen. I hear that term all the time.
So evergreen in this business is uber important, right? Evergreen means that when you sign up an account and you sign one of your valued customers on one of the carriers, you will be paid for as long as that customer stays on service. So some of the companies that are out there don't want this, obviously, in their agreement because they don't really want to have to pay for the customer for as long as it's on. But our main argument every time is, hey, look, that customer would never be with your company without the efforts of our partner who brought it to you. So why not pay for as long as it stays on? So that's what we request in our agreements, and that's what we really push for, and that's typically what we get from every carrier.
Yeah, and so ultimately that protects that sales partner like yourself to make sure they continue to get paid no matter what.
You got it. Yep.
Good. Well, I tell you, let's kind of switch gears a little bit. That's why a master in terms of from a contractual perspective. But the other big reason is we also look at things like the rich technology stack, right? It's not about just circuits. Many years ago, you go back about a decade, when I would ask a question, what is a master agent? You might think about circuits mainly, right? I mean, that would be what would immediately come to mind, telecommunications. Yep. But now over the last 10 years, you guys have signed up a tremendous number. You mentioned 220 plus suppliers, and that ranges anything from telecommunication circuits to cloud compute, voice, data, cybersecurity. I mean, SD-WAN, networking, all those parts and pieces, even IoT and wireless, which is kind of interesting. I mean, even things as simple as the ability to sell 4G, 5G wireless backup circuits, then maybe it's a primary, or even the IoT devices and monitors and sensors to even maybe go out and do those sort of things. So, yep. And this is just kind of a solid approach in terms of some of the technology stack that we do have. So, starting to the left there, we've got anything from cloud compute. So if you walk into an organization, you can look at things like virtual servers, virtual desktops. It could be as simple as co-location. A lot of folks start kind of dipping their toes in the water, going down a cloud route by simply, taking what's on-prem today and pushing that into a co-location, a data center facility of some sort, right? It gets, basically almost 100% SLA on things like power, space, cooling, all those kind of things kind of built into that. So it's kind of that first dip in the toe for that, getting it off-prem. Another thing that's kind of cool there is even things like disaster recovery. It's maybe you've got somebody that still wants to kind of control that server. They want to still continue to make that CapEx spend on the server side, but maybe they're okay and comfortable with, I don't want to have to repeat that spend, double that spend to replicate that data from me up to somewhere else, right? So maybe replicate the data into a cloud provider And then if it ever becomes necessary, and we, you know, a lot of us live in Florida. I happen to be a Carolinian, but we're down here at the IT Expo here in Florida. You know, hurricane seasons, things like that. What if we don't, you know, what if we get that data off-prem into the cloud provider, and that way, if God forbid something happens and it's underwater, whatever it might be, at least the data is protected. They can spin up additional resources and get that up and running, sometimes in a matter of minutes. So it's definitely something to start with in a lot of customers. And the cool thing is, later on, as they start down that DR path, in many cases, it starts that and becomes almost that gateway drug into other areas, right? So once they go down that path, later down the line, instead of actually rebuying that hardware 3, 4, 5 years down, they'll go and say, well, why am I doing that? I can just pay a monthly recurring, you know, cost associated with that and go that path for reduction as well. So,
Gary, as you dive deeper and deeper into the stack and your customers purchase more of these options from you as their trusted advisor, you know, what do you think happens with that particular customer when they have all these different, you know, options available to them?
You know, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you know, we all make more money, right? I mean, that's the good news, right? Because we become much, much stickier with that organization, right? But the flip side is also true, and this is something to kind of be aware of. It's an opportunity as well as a threat, right? You know, the old SWOT analysis. And what I mean by that, if you're not bringing that up, then somebody else will. You know, what if you're competitive? What if somebody else is in there and says, you know what, I notice you've got these telecommunication circuits and all these other things, but have you heard about Office 365? That's something that's kind of ubiquitous from going down an email exchange type of environment today. Have you heard about things like cloud computer? Have you heard about hosted voice? And if you haven't brought that up, then somebody else can get in there and ask those questions. And over time, they may say, well, you know what, I know you already, you know, have these circuits, you know, I could do that too. And so it's also one of those things that it's about account preservation as well, because they're gonna buy this stuff. So why not let it be you guys, right? Why let somebody else get in there and offer these type of services? A perfect example, I had an account back many years ago, and I had, you know, again, this is back when I was on the supplier side, like 7 years ago. And I had a particular partner of mine that went into the account, and we actually did a DAS type of a proof of concept, right? And what's kind of interesting about that is at the time they weren't ready. This was more of a you know, engineering firm. They had Autodesk, and all these sort of fancy applications and services, and so it started that. But this particular partner of mine, he had a couple of circuits he'd sold through them. Only a few circuits for a couple $1,000s a month. So it's a very small account for today's standard, right? But then over time, that didn't work out, but later he went back in there and he sold a hosted voice solution. And that was for several grand. It's about 200 users, 250 users, so nothing huge, but a decent size account, right? And it went, you know, kind of do the math on that, so a few grand for that. And then later they pulled him back in a couple of years later after that went well, and the implementation continued to go well, and he told him a little bit of SDWAN, but down the path, he turned around and said, well, you know, I've got this engineer that I know, and I know you're actually looking to replace all your server infrastructure. Let me pull in and have a conversation with you, right? And so he pulled me into the conversation, and we actually whiteboarded out a lot of different technologies, and one of those is, you know, what about cloud versus the on-prem CapEx type spend? What would that look like? And we also dove into other things, like, for instance, all of a sudden talked about desktop as a service, because they were worried about these big, huge, fancy applications and the latency associated with the different locations that they had. So I was talking about how that would solve some of their issues. And so we whiteboarded this stuff out. Next thing you know, we eventually sold about a $50,000 deal with desktop as a service, virtual desktops, dedicated GPUs, all this sort of technology that went across multiple of these stacks all of a sudden. So now all of a sudden we're talking about cloud compute, desktop as a service, managed services. We're going across the stack, so some security and things like that with SD-WAN. So now we're ticking a lot of those boxes. And so the good news is, to this day, that customer is still relying upon that sales partner because he went across the entire stack. So it's much, much stickier. So.
And that account started as a $3,000-4,000 spend that added some UCaaS on, but then ultimately turned into $50,000. So tell us a little bit about that particular partner. No names or anything, but now I think you told me the guy, typically his vertical was, you know, $500 to a couple $1,000 accounts, and didn't he hit you with a comment the other day about, you know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. I've had a couple of sales partners like this, and this guy in particular, and I've got another guy very similar to that in another part of the country. But what's kind of interesting is this guy came back later, and he's kind of ticked off because he sold like a $6,000 deal. He's like, well, you know, it's only $6,000. I don't know. It's like, and I looked at him like, dude, what are you talking about? You know, you were used to, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 deal being a good size opportunity for you, and now you're complaining that you only sold one for $6,000 or $8,000 now. You know, do you not remember that that would have been a huge account for you many years ago? So all of a sudden now, you know, it's flipped the script, and all of a sudden now he's expecting the $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 deals because that's what he's been involved in for so much time. So,
and that's what happens when you get deeper into the stack, right? More opportunities arise, more larger sales, you know, start to appear. So, I love it.
No, 100%. So again, you got the voice collaboration. Again, that includes even things like UCaaS and contact center, things like that. You know, even texting and eFax. A lot of the things we don't normally think about. But also, I talked to a lot of MSPs, for instance, that maybe sell on-prem Avaya or on-prem Cisco and things like that. And in some of those cases, I always tell them, well, Mr. MSP, you know, you're going to get blamed when that Avaya system goes down, whether it's actually the Avaya system where it has to be SIP or PRIs and things like that on the back end. So why not make money on that as well, right? You might as well get money and be paid on that, even if you technically are more the Avaya guy, for instance, and maybe even anti-cloud to a certain extent. But oh, by the way, that same customer's probably, when you go back to renew them and try and sell the next iteration of that Avaya or that Cisco, they're probably going to ask about cloud anyways. Yep. You're probably competing against that today that you may not even be aware of. And so again, you might as well not only offer what you do today and you get paid handsomely for that, but you might as well give them a cloud option because they're probably going to, that's who you're competing against, so you might as well win either way you go.
Yep.
So even things like hosted voice, contact centers, obviously networking is still huge. I mean, that's still the bread and butter of what we do every single day. But then look at things like SD-WAN and some next iterations of that. In fact, at 1 o'clock today, we'll be talking about SD-WAN and what that looks like and how to take that as a linchpin to kind of start with and then grow that into other areas of technology. So we'll talk about that a lot at 1 o'clock today. But then security is huge. I mean, I think all of us today just get bombarded with the news and almost kind of sick and tired of hearing about all the cybersecurity attacks and what's happening. And I mean, just the Colonial Pipeline, even down in Florida and up in the Carolinas for me, I mean, you know, I had to stand in line for gas and actually stop from, you know, different filling station to different filling stations trying to find some. So, but again, the entire technology stack is definitely something to take a look at. It's, you know, and the bottom line is different companies are buying all these different areas of technology for the most part. And so the thing I always say to my agents like yourself is, why not make money off of it, right? They're going to buy it anyways. Why not from folks like yourself here?
They're using it through somebody. They may as well be using it through you, and you're making commission on it. Is, you know, what we say.
And again, just introducing my role a little bit. Again, I'm in the cloud and engineering side of the house. You know, kind of grew up in this space. Some people kind of laugh at me. Sometimes they'll ask the question, "Well, Gary, you know, how long have you been a part of the telecommunications world?" And I always answer it the same as, well, I don't really consider myself part of the telco world, which seems kind of backwards now, especially Dan's now, you know, hired me here, and so it seems like it's all centered around telco, but I grew up more managed services, server-related type technologies. In fact, at one point I worked for the #2 software company in the world. Not that many people remember it now. I actually worked for a company called Novell many, many years ago. But they've kind of non-existent at this point, so we'll just leave it at that. The good news is they went out of business well after I was gone, just to throw that out there.
Had nothing to do with you.
Nothing to do with me. But they actually were they owned 70% of the file share market space way back in the day. So they were huge in that space. But then later worked at Mecklenburg County and actually was their enterprise architect for many years there. Later worked for several data center and cloud providers. Actually used to teach at a local community college up in Charlotte. Used to teach a lot of Cisco type route switch wireless, a lot of Microsoft courses, a lot of Novell courses, things like that through the years. But really the three main roles associated with the cloud and solutions engineering team here is education, you know, education, right? It's all about making sure more and more sales partners feel more comfortable having these types of complex sales type conversations with your end customers. That's really the bottom line. Whether that's doing events like this, whether that's doing webinars and seminars and things like that, we actually have a 2.5-day TCG Live type, you know, where you sit in a room and you go 2.5 days on nothing but cloud and data center and voice and things like that. So you're invited to those sort of things. We're doing those, but also even one-on-one type training sessions. You know, if you've got a team or you just want to learn more about how to sell certain product sets and things like that, you're glad to schedule some time and set up some one-on-one session times with you. So definitely here to do that. Of course, assistance with supplier selections. So if you give a list, hey, I just talked to this customer and they're looking for this, 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 and this, I can make some recommendations in terms of who the right supplier might be in that given situation, right? And then finally, the other piece is kind of cool is, and I love doing this, so definitely take me up on this, but if you're ever in a situation where you're not even sure where to kind of fit me in, or you're not even sure how to bring up certain subjects, if you can set up a conversation with that end customer, I can in essence be your engineer for the day. I can be that engineer for that 30 minutes of that hour session and actually sit down with you and that customer and actually help you uncover some of the opportunities within that account. So definitely.
Gary, what do you think some of the benefits of having an unbiased sales engineer working in your corner versus having a carrier sales engineer on a particular call? I mean,
yeah, no, that's a great question. It's kind of interesting. Just like when I had that account visit, I mentioned earlier, whiteboarding out. I didn't even bring up any specific carrier or telco or cloud or anything like that. I just talked about pure cloud and some of the options and some of the services that are available. And then afterwards, I got with that agent later and said, you know what, who do you think? Here's who I'm thinking. Let's pull these guys in and let's have this conversation. Because one of the things that's always kind of scary, right, is, when you start having that cloud conversation, as an example, I know a lot of partners are scared. Well, A, I don't maybe know what to ask, but B, if I pull in a specific supplier, they're going to pitch their stuff, right? I mean, if I'm a supplier that's in cloud compute, even if it's a fit or it's not a right fit for your customer, guess what I'm doing?
Yep.
I mean, I used to be on the supplier side. I mean, I used to, be the engineer, and anybody remember the show that Spin City? Michael J. Fox, that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but it used to, the whole premise of the show was he's a politician, and so he was actually writing things for a politician, and so he's spinning it such that it looks very attractive, whether it's the right solution or not sometimes.
Yep.
And so I think we always have that concern, what if I bring in a supplier and they're just going to pitch their stuff and maybe it's not the right fit and they're maybe going to ruin the relationship I have with that client. So that's really the beauty behind what I can offer is the ability to come in and help and assist and have that vendor neutral type conversation where I'm just talking about technology and helping teach the client something maybe they hadn't thought about before.
Yep.
So,
love it.
cool. And again, a lot of this stuff we can do remotely. I can do remote whiteboarding sessions. A lot of this stuff I can go through that process. The big thing I like to talk a lot about is teaching while selling them, right? It's about teaching and getting that customer to say, you know what, I hadn't thought about that before. And give them something to think about, new ways to use technology within their IT staff, right? So moving right along, again, I mentioned the 2.5-day certification class, so that's definitely out there. The next one coming up is Dallas, Texas, so September 13th through the 15th. Connie's been working tirelessly on that one, so that one's actually in the process now. So if that's something you'd like to learn more about, see me afterwards, see Connie, see Dan, see any of us here. We can certainly get you signed up for that, so definitely take a look at that. But it's really sitting down with you for 2.5 days with 10 different suppliers and just going through nothing but cloud and different ways to bring the conversation up, different sales methodologies, look at the technology. Again, hopefully make you more comfortable having those conversations with your end clients. And of course, the other thing you'll start seeing, in fact, coming up on the 29th of this month, we've got different tech talks where I'm going to actually break down a technology, maybe whiteboard it out, like I've got an SD-WAN one coming out. And it's not just SD-WAN to be, the latest buzzword, but how do you take SD-WAN and make it applicable and uncover other opportunities, right? I mean, how many times have you ever tried to, have a connectivity discussion and you get just a spreadsheet back and list all the locations, all the cities, all that stuff, maybe telephone numbers associated with it, and give me a quote, Mr. Sales Partner, right? And so what I want to do is have the conversation in the context of, looking at where the applications and the data exist, where the data flows, all that kind of good stuff, and you start uncovering a lot more opportunities throughout that process. And it can uncover it and make you much, much stickier. But more importantly, it really is the next generation connectivity, particularly if your clients are already moving down the cloud path. So you'll see that kind of stuff, tech talks with me, panels associated with it. We're going to follow it up July 15th with a panel with different SD-WAN providers to dig into some of their specifics and how they can work with you as well. So. And I want to turn it back to you for just a minute, Dan, and talk about other reasons to look at TCG.
Sure. So getting kind of back to the nuts and bolts of this thing, right? Personnel that know the business, know the carriers. We specifically tasked different groups within our back office to work with carriers like AT&T and Comcast and Spectrum Business and Altice and Lumen. So we've got teams assigned to each one of those carriers, and what that does is it creates black belts in those particular companies, right? So these guys, all they focus on are those particular carriers. So it means that they're well trained at it, they understand the systems, they understand how to get orders through, they know where to go when problems arise, and you get all of that by being a partner with TCG. Our channel managers have average of 5 to 6 years of experience within the industry. So, when you work with our guys, you should rest assured know that they know their stuff. They're not just kind of pushing solutions on you and your customers that don't make sense. First class cloud and sales engineering. Gary is the best in the business. He definitely, what I like to say about this industry too is you have to put time into it a little bit, right? I mean, if you're an air conditioning repair guy, you want to go get your seals and you want to get your black and your blue and all these different seals so that you can be better at your craft. Well, telecom and cloud is no different, right? We have to put the time in to know the products, and by getting more educated on these particular products, it'll open up more revenue opportunities for you as a sales partner. So constantly staying in front of the education is huge. Better upfront bonuses and spiffs, we covered that earlier. Higher commission payouts, commission audits of your sold deals, great President's Club trips. We like to say that our President's Clubs are bucket list, events, right? We don't just kind of go lay up on a beach somewhere and, Cancun and call it a President's Club. Our trips are events, right? They're, Ireland and Spain this year, and 2 years ago, Costa Rica, and we go to really exotic and cool places. Do you have a slide for that as well? Okay, so with our President's Club too, there's a lot of different ways to get on it. You can do it just by hitting a revenue goal, which is $75,000 in aggregate sales, or you can choose one of the many carriers that are part of this and punch out what their requirement is. So there's a lot of different ways to get on the trip.
And of course, one of the last items just to re-mention here is again, on June 29th, we've got the SDWAN webinar coming up. So if you're interested in that, see Connie, see myself, see Dan, we can get you the invite. It should be up on LinkedIn, should be other places, but again, if you have trouble figuring out where to go, definitely see us for that. So, and last but not least, really just wanted to spend a few minutes with you, Dan, and first off, just wanted to open it up for Q&A, see what questions you might have for us to start with. So
the President's Club.
Yes.
75, did I hear you say aggregate of 75,000?
75,000 total revenue, or you can choose one of the carriers. So a lot of the carriers have, if you sell 250 seats of hosted VoIP, you're automatically in. So there's a couple different ways to get on. So
right. Is that Dan? Is that booked revenue, or is that on a calendar year out, or is that actual real revenue after you make the sale?
Yep. So from January 1st to December 31st, any sale within that time period counts for it, and then. Again, you can kind of choose if you wanted to hit one of the carriers. Like if you sell a lot of, I think I saw Nexagen here a minute ago. They have sell 200 seats and you make the trip. So.
Right, and that's net new business, not.
Yeah, new business, new billing.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Good. See, I was at least, and you couldn't read the fine print down there on the slide and
Yeah.
get your magnifying glass out and see all the fine details there. So,
Connie, do you have a question?
One thing you guys did not mention was our new Circle of Excellence.
Excellent point. So, as a partner with TCG, as you attain revenue thresholds, you get benefits to those different thresholds. And I think the minimum level is what, $50,000 in billing to become what's the level? Classic, correct? Okay, so classic, and once you do that, you get a lot of different perks, and those perks are VIP treatment to events, first offers of getting invited to different things that happen throughout the year, guaranteed room for our channel source, airfare and flights once you start moving up the stack a little bit, and then once you get to $1 million in billing, Connie, what do we get for $1 million? Oh, but wait, there's more.
I don't remember what did we decide?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Look at Dan.
Connie, come on. All right. Well,
as you can
yet to
tell,
be
this
determined.
is still
Wyatt
in
wasn't on
process.
this. Wyatt wasn't there.
It's definitely in process, but definitely a lot of cool rewards a lot of different levels. As you reach and move up the stack, you'll start receiving more and more benefits by being a TCG partner at that point. So, but cool. Well, Dan, I know that, you know, the company's been around 31 years, I think you said earlier. So why was that now, you know, the last year or so, look at cloud engineering? What kind of made you pull the trigger on that?
Well, I mean, look, the business has been moving that way for a number of years, and we're heavily invested. We have all the cloud providers within our portfolio, and it was just a matter of time before we, you know, brought in a sales engineer, and the timing was just perfect to bring you aboard. And you know, we're looking forward to adding more sales engineers that'll report up through you. And you know, these sales are getting more and more complex, and literally every time you turn on the TV, you're hearing about some company that's been ransomware somewhere within the United States. So there's never been a better time to talk about this stuff with your clients. If they're not protecting themselves against intrusion, you know, malware, if they're not like educating their employees on not to click through emails, it's just a matter of time before they come into work one day and get that message on the screen that says, send us $250,000 in Bitcoin or you'll never see your information again. So, I mean, look, it's out there, man. And if you're not talking about it again, somebody else will talk about it. And then when they do, they may bring in another network provider to replace the service that you've had with a long-term customer. So we have to be out front of this. If we're not, then we're just falling behind.
Yeah, and one of the things I just heard as well, just for the audience as well, is that it's not just a team of one. Right now, today it's a team of one, but looking to grow this and continue to expand and again, continue to make investments in our sales partners by allowing more and more access to resources. And speaking of that, I know you've also hired Connie and several other folks. I know some new marketing folks and others. I mean, you're obviously very bullish on the future and what TCG looks like and making huge investments. So maybe just talk about some of the things you're doing on that front and why you think it's so important to make an investment in TCG.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So we're investing in some great tools right now, a qualification portal that is going to go down to the end user. It's going to show what fiber carriers are available, ultimately be able to generate paperwork for all those different companies. We're bringing on more personnel. We've just added people to our marketing team. We're investing in sales engineering. We're going to be putting together some programmers to do some back office portal activity, which we've been talking about for some time. And you know, look, there's never been a better time than right now. And now is the time to continue to grow the business and push it to the next level. And that's what we're doing. You know, TCG is not for sale. A lot of companies out there have sold. You know, we're the largest privately held master agency right now, and we have no intention of going anywhere. So, you know, we're looking for a great run, and we're going to keep building this thing out. And, you know, look, it's all about the agencies, right, that we support. I mean, everything is geared around the partners that we work with and making sure that they're happy. So as needs arise, we're going to fulfill them, and we don't have a problem doing that. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I guess the last question I got for you, you've been in this industry for a good while. If I'm either a brand new sales partner here and or B, I'm an existing sales partner that's been around a good bit, what advice would you give me on either front? Either existing partner that's, again, been in this industry for a good while, or again, maybe that new guy that's just starting out?
Well, I mean, if you're just starting out, I think the biggest thing, you know, a lot of people kind of look at the channel as a whole and they say, man, those guys have so much fun and they're always doing fun things and they're always, you know, having great events. But you know what? The most successful people that attend those events have done the hard work, right? They get out there and they build their business and they make 100 calls a day and they knock on doors and they network and they close business and they're constantly active. And you know, once you get to a point of having a certain amount of volume up, you can start to kind of take your foot off the gas pedal just a little bit. But in the early stages, you really have to work hard. Now, for the guys that have been in it for a long time, you know, they have to, I think, have to continuously keep honing their craft and getting better at what this industry is. Because again, if you're not talking about some of these new technologies that are coming out, you're just going to be falling behind, right? So you've got to have that in your bag. You've got to be the person to talk about it. You don't want one of your great customers to have a conversation about a product that you can sell simply because you didn't bring it up. So, you know, it's a business, right? And you have to operate like a business.
Yeah, no, I love the last part especially. I mean, I remember there was a partner of mine many years ago that they literally walked into an account, they figured out that they had just sold a hosted voice, somebody else did, into that account that they'd had for years and years and years and years. I mean, it was an account that they knew and probably a 10-year customer of theirs. And they just sold, you know, things like, you know, hosted voice and I think Office 365 together, and they looked at them like, well, you know, that deer in the head, like, I can't believe you bought that from somebody else. And they asked the guys, well, you know I can do that, right? And they're like, well, you know, Mr. Agent, I tell you what, when I need circuits, I'll call you. And that's exactly, they pigeonholed them into selling mainly circuits, and they didn't even realize all the other avenues, all the different technology stacks they had available to them. And so that sort of lit a fire underneath that particular partner, and they started going to different activities and events and learning and educating themselves. But again, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me is, you know, as you have opportunities, feel free to use someone like myself and others, and make sure you plug back into the education sessions, and make sure you're looking at the entire technology stack, not just limiting yourself to one set of folks in the organization. Go wide and deep on these accounts. And that's really what the latter half of the day is all about, is going wide and deep in accounts with things like SDWAN and security and cloud compute and remote working from home. All those other areas, make sure you take some time to learn about that sort of stuff. And again, learn and grow and continue to make additional money and income during the process. So.
And one last thing I'll mention is I just had this conversation, you know, yesterday with a partner. They had a very large customer, and they said, well, these guys are never going to go to UCaaS because they have so many users and PRIs are so much more economical. So same thing, they didn't pitch that, they didn't talk about that or even offer it to their customers. So what ended up happening was, you know, Ring Central came with a great price, and next thing you know, 1,000-seat customer is going over to a carrier that they could have sold, but they were just assuming that, hey, this customer didn't need that because of their current PRI setup and, you know, the stuff that they have in place today. Well, there are some big deals moving, you know, to cloud and UCaaS. So if you're not, you know, talking about this stuff, don't be surprised if it kind of happens underneath you, right? The ground is definitely shifting, so.
No. Well, I appreciate your time today, Dan. Any other final questions from anybody? Well, I tell you what, thank you, everybody, and we will see you at 1 o'clock then.
Thanks, guys.